It's
one of the many aspects of it.
And that wasn't
It's
spelled out.
6:03.
It is spelled out in the original.
And we're going to start, even though we have people coming in, we're going to start with the pledge real fast. We're not really starting without you. Keep going. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mike's going to speak to us real fast.
Yeah, just a few minutes, and thank you for giving me the time. You may have heard that over the last 2 years, we've been looking at revising and updating the ethics law for the town. And that encompasses all elected officials, volunteers, all kinds of boards, and so on. Pam has spearheaded that along with Betsy and Laura. They completed their project 2 months ago. We submitted to the town board. We went through the public comment period. We adopted it last time. Now their task, and we're meeting tomorrow on it, is to educate everybody on these new rules and upgrading old rules on ethical behavior for all officials. 2 months ago, Jeff Battistoni and I happened to be attending a state presentation on, we went to look at short-term rentals. That was our main reason for going. And that's a project.
You and Jeff went to look for short-term rentals?
Jeff Battistoni and I.
No, I understand that. Short-term rentals?
No, they went to some
on short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals.
I understand.
Up in Hyde Park. There were probably 18 to 20 towns present, villages, and so on. But another subject matter that was covered was the ethical conditions and conduct of planning board, zoning board members, and those affiliated with those, such as consultants, CACs, and so on. So I've met with planning, I've met with zoning, and the material that was handed out was excellent. Part of it was because the lawyer explained to us, a lot of cases now are going to court because complainants are saying there was a violation. It was not an illegal violation, but it was an ethical violation. The judges are listening to all of these comments about ethical behavior of people on these boards. And things are getting kicked back for secondary votes. And it goes back, for instance, if the planning board voted an approval, but the court kicked it out, you would have to go back. And now from supermajority, you would have to go through the process again to decide for or against.
So basically what's happening, I go in front of the planning board, I say I want a pool, you say, no, it's too close to the wetland, and then I go to
That's not the issue.
Okay, tell me what the issue
The
is.
issue is the behavior
That's
of
what I'm saying.
the committee people.
I was getting to
So
that.
here's an example. For planning and zoning, site plans are allowed.
Right?
One person can go on a site visit, a whole group can go on a site visit. Typically, although it's not mandatory, the person that is putting in the application can be present, doesn't have to be present. More often they're present. That is supposed to be just an examination of what has been presented in the writing. There is not supposed to be any dialogue other than maybe asking a couple of questions, but you should not get into a conversation of, well, you talked about putting your garage here, wouldn't it look better over there? And the reason for that is because those kinds of over-the-fence talk is outside of the open meeting law. Everything that has to do with an application should occur around this table. Not by phone, not by email, not by conversation on a site visit, not in the supermarket, because that has become an ethical issue according to the judges and the law that's starting to be applied. What they're saying is conflicts of interest, recusing yourself, not participating in a vote are all becoming serious issues because, especially in small communities, people know one another and so on. I'll give you an example, and the lawyer gave an example. Out in central New York, a chairman of a planning board relative came before the board. He was in favor. He knew most of the people on the board were in favor, but he excused himself. But he went and sat in the first row, facing, and through hand signals, was telling people basically how to vote. That got picked up, went to the judge, said absolutely not, threw it out. The process had to start all over again. So in here, you'll see things.
Mike, getting back to your first example, you take a site visit,
you guys got something somewhere, and you say, well, you have it may be illegal, but if you put it here, it's legal.
You cannot
Can't
talk
say
about
that.
that.
Okay.
You cannot say any of that stuff.
If you have questions about, now that you, let's say, gone to, gone to the site itself, then you
Those
can,
questions come back at the meeting.
okay, but
You
you
don't
can't,
even discuss it among yourselves at the site visit, nor do you discuss it among yourselves outside of the meeting.
I was gonna say, excuse me for interrupting, but like, if the applicant is there, and you say, okay, for instance, the site plan we've seen so far shows the wetland area. Could you point out in what direction the wetland area is, or something that's germane to
Sure,
your
because
site
it's
visit?
part of the materials that were handed in. But when you start to get into an influencing of either party, then it becomes an ethical issue that courts are beginning to make judgments on. They say it's very difficult to control, but they're saying if there's an impression that there is some type of conflict, make it known, get it into the minutes. If, for instance, you got stopped at the supermarket and you did get in a conversation, put that in the minutes when you come to your meeting saying, by the way, I met the applicant, they asked me a question, I got into conversation. As long as it's in the minutes, you're covering yourself and you're becoming truly transparent. The problem is people are not transparent enough. People who are interested in either party are beginning to use those kinds of instances in their rebuttals against petitions, or when it goes to court, lawyers are making a lot of money pulling these people in and asking for emails, phone conversations,
Text
written
messages.
communication, and so on.
Yep.
You don't lose any right being on this board as a citizen to participate in any conversations that take place, planning, zoning, any of the things that a town decides upon. But you're acting as a citizen sitting here, not as a citizen sitting here. Also, as a representative of in your case, an advisory committee, picking up the telephone and calling somebody that you know is an applicant who may have an issue, but you think you have a solution to that issue, don't do those kinds of things. Because that is becoming outside of the open meeting law, and those things are being challenged. So these were the only things, Pam, that were specific to zoning planning. So what Pam and Betsy and Laura have put together is a much broader ethical considerations as a member of the town government, which as a volunteer on this group you are. But there's some good things in there. If you ever have a question though, it's better to play it safe, speak to Sarah, our attorney, because Jeff is not the attorney anymore. And those are the things that they're recommending to do. It's tough to do in a town. They said it's very difficult to do in a small town because everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
But it's always good to be open as possible, reveal everything, don't keep anything secrets, and we should be fine.
Beautiful.
Last thing,
That makes
I'm not
sense.
trying to
Yeah.
pepper you with this.
Learned that on the
Most of
CPRC
questions I
recently.
get about issues that either come up here, village meeting, or anything else are from people who are basically not informed. And they wanna know what, this or that. And let's say if I do have a conversation with someone else who's a town of Washington resident about something that happens here, then I should make that known when I come back to this group and say, I had a conversation with so-and-so in Ronan, and this is what we discussed, and as long as I do that, so that I'm noting it in the minutes, that doesn't preclude me from not saying I can't discuss it unless you come to the meeting, because that's part of the problem too.
You can do that, and another way of saying it too is we do have minutes, we do record our meetings. If you have a specific question, call the chairman, and if the chairman can't answer it, call the attorney, and the attorney may have the answer to what they're looking for. Another thing to be careful of too, they said, is when, especially in small towns, when there's so many people on various boards, if you're sitting in the audience and you speak at a meeting, make sure you're speaking as a citizen and don't identify yourself as a member of the town board or a member of
That makes sense.
the CAC or a member, because then the assumption is you're speaking on behalf of this board, our board, and you may not be. you may be in contradiction to what the board has decided.
Right.
So you gotta be careful of those things too. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I also
Thank you.
spoke to Martha and said, maybe tomorrow we'll talk about how to educate all of these.
Is that on the record, Mike?
What's that?
Is that on the record?
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Quick question,
He's
Mike.
telling
There's
everybody
something
now.
called
It's
duty
good.
of fair representation in unions, which means if you do your best and you screw up, but you did your best, you're not held responsible for anything legally. Does that apply here?
When you start talking ethical, you're not talking
So
legal.
there's no this is not a legal.
Yes, these are ethical
This
issues.
is-
However,
we'd
the
like it
ethical
behaved that
issues
way.
are opening the doors to courts now, where
That's what you mentioned.
once you
courts.
get in to the court on an ethical issue, smart attorneys are going to start weaving it so that it becomes a legal issue.
So my question, I think it applies, I think Mary answered this once, but since it's in my head again, we as a CAC are covered under the duty of fair representation type of laws, just as you guys are.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. That's
Anything else?
the bottom line.
Great,
No,
thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank
stopping
you.
in.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to approving the minutes of September 7th. I believe we had one correction, Shannon, that you noted, and I think we corrected it, Lisa, right? Yep. So can I have a motion to approve our minutes from Elizabeth is our,
I motion to
Motion?
approve our minutes.
as corrected, and second?
Sure.
Shannon, second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, and so moved. We're jumping around because we're missing Leslie. So, actually, Howard, do you want to do your little spiel at the moment?
Exactly, a little one. I'd like to
Well,
first.
that'll
You
use
know
it.
it's not going to be a little
It's-
one.
so
No,
you'll
Howard.
use-
this is a
you'll
pretty serious
use-
one. It's
I
not
know,
a little
I know,
one.
no,
I
I'm
know,
just
but
kidding.
you'll
I'm just
use a
joking,
lot of
Howard.
time because we're waiting for Leslie. So go ahead.
Well, we could do the plan, I want to talk about what happened with our appeal to the ZBA. I think that has long-term implications and I want everybody to see where and get an opinion from everybody and hear what people think.
Mhm.
And then there's the basic, what went on at the planning board meeting, the ZBA meeting.
Mhm.
That's just,
Yep.
that should be pretty fast because Margaret has been sending everybody all of the decisions and all the meeting notes.
Yep.
So everybody knows most of this already.
Yep,
All
Good.
right, so
it's working along, right?
yeah, so
Nice
there's
and-
not too
nice
much
and
to say there.
efficient.
I mean, Aaron's
Uh,
summaries are good.
Yeah,
It's very helpful.
no, I know, he's great.
The planning board meeting that happened yesterday is new. You didn't get anything yet on that unless you were zoomed
Unless you
in.
were zooming in on it
Yeah,
or live.
and the, or here, and you were here, so you can talk about some of this too. The big one was the Johnson division where they had that 500 acres there. That is, along with the Bonnecue section of the town, is probably the most environmentally intact and nicest section environmentally of the whole town. Bonnecue gave a lot of this into trust, so that's safe still environmentally. And I think the rest of this is probably going to be okay too. The Johnson thing, on the other hand, you don't know what is going on with it. At least I don't know, and people who were there probably don't know, other than they have divided it up into lots among family members, and that's what this whole thing is about, how many divisions they can
Are
make
they
at the
dividing it
moment.
into 5 or 7
Seven,
lots?
there's seven.
That's
It's-
down
it's
to
going-
7.
It's going from 3 tax parcels to 7 tax parcels.
And that seems to be intact, that they can't do any more until 10 years are up. But the problem is that we discussed with the board, and the board did not agree with us, or they didn't do anything at the moment, is what do you do with the large environmental areas that are on all of these parcels? Some of these environmental areas may cover several parcels, which is, if you're familiar with that place, it's huge.
Mhm.
And it's almost all open space up there and different types of habitats. So we wanted them to put something in the conditional approvals that before anything happens, somebody has to take a look at that property and identify where these sensitive environmental areas are, like a bog turtle area, for example. Bog turtles need at least 500 feet in terms of, if I'm correct on this, in terms of their habitat. That habitat can, and they're endangered. And that habitat can overlap 2 or 3 lots, depending on where it is. So how do you protect that? That each person doesn't start to chew 200, 300 feet out of it on their lot and develop it, and then the bog turtle suddenly doesn't have a habitat anymore. So we asked them if they could put in a special codicil in there saying that before any development starts on that property, because it's so sensitive environmentally, that somebody like a Hudsonia should look at that property and identify more of these things, which Hudsonia can do pretty quickly. They're very good at it. They refused to do that. They said, we can't do that. So that was a little surprising. They always claim they have powers, discretionary powers to do things. And their discretionary power in this case, with the advice of their attorney, if I'm correct, was that we don't want to do that. So I thought the CAC might be interested in that, because we, at least me, the CAC, I assume the rest of you too, would like to protect those things ahead of time before it's too late. And at least have somebody involved when these things happen, and it comes to everybody's attention. So that was the other part of it. That was ignored by the planning board for the moment. I don't know where to proceed with that afterwards. And anybody have any ideas on that?
Is the work on the natural resources inventory and designating critical environmental areas under our zoning code, wouldn't that be of help here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big part of what we do through
Yeah.
that, and I think that's going to be, it's going to come out
And
in
so,
our NRI.
and so if that comes out in the NRI, that would probably supersede
Mhm.
these lot divisions. So I think that puts a premium on us somehow, doing
Because
this.
technically they have the right, if it's stays the 3 parcels that it is, they have the right to build on it in any capacity they want.
Right.
So it's not going to change by changing the 7 parcels. It's still going to, they'll still be able to have the right to build. They just won't have the right to subdivide again for 10 years. So they have the right, but I think a part of our NRI will come through, hopefully, and show some of these sensitive areas.
Well, you see, the part that with the planning board, they always say, well, we have the right to improvise, in so many words. We have discretion is the word they use all the time. I'm not perfectly sure that's legal anyway, but they refuse to do it. So the NRIs, we've had NRIs before and nobody enforces them. So if that's the direction that you think is a good direction, somewhere in the NRI, there has to be something that enforces these things. Because the NRI, if you probably get into the old NRIs, I'm willing to take a guess that Johnson has a lot of stuff in the old NRIs as well, that big piece of property. And it's never come up, and there's no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no legal enforcement on these NRIs, which there probably should be.
Well, the critical environmental, if the critical
Yeah.
environmental area is designated, there is enforceability to that.
And that's state law, isn't it?
That will happen, but you have to have some facts on which to base your critical environmental area, and you
Mhm.
also can't designate the whole town, you have to
You have to do that,
prioritize.
you have to prioritize.
And
what's
did
there.
they, so 2 questions.
Mhm.
One, this is under Millbrook Village water. Has this been referred to the village?
Yeah.
I've received nothing yet.
The Johnson, they said they maybe they're going to go to,
No, is that, I'll answer that, Mike.
oh yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
When Mike and I worked on the village water committee, we got into why the village has a special law. There's three towns in the whole state that have
I
this law.
remember the reasoning that it,
And the reasoning was they wanted to protect certain areas from having development come in. So there's a section in the code that says this has to be reported if you're in that map that we worked on.
Right, yeah, well, basically, it's a source water protection
Mhm.
plan, and there's only 3 in the state now, and they started doing these way back in the late 80s, and then, I'm not sure exactly why, but 3 or 4 municipalities qualified. We will happen to be one of them. The town did, as in conjunction with it, and then it got dropped, and I'm not quite sure why. I think it had something to do with the fact that the Homeland Security and things of that nature made it more difficult to be able to go through the public kind of information that would be available on where your water was, where your sewer was, and that kind of
right,
thing.
yeah,
those kind
right.
of threats. So they just, the whole process of getting a source water protection plan kind of went down the tubes for a while, and that just stopped. But in the last 4 or 5 years, it's come back now, obviously, in with a vengeance, because everybody, especially after places like Newburgh that had PFAS in their water, and
Mhm.
Lake Washington and places like that, it became more of an issue, and it is going to continue to be an issue. And now the government is doing a 180 and encouraging people to get a source water protection plan.
Right.
So, even though ours is, to me, somewhat outdated because it has if you look at the language, it doesn't do a whole heck of a
No,
lot.
it doesn't do a lot, but it is.
Of protecting based on, I mean, it does in the 80s, but if you look at all the chemical things that have happened since then, that aren't even mentioned, in the loopholes, like, you can have things like the stormwater runoff is not something that they even bother to look at. And if you have stormwater runoff going through the entire watershed area and it's exempt from any kind of limitations, then right there by itself, you've got some real holes.
So this was referred to the Village of Millbrook because it's in the protection zone. So if it hasn't been, then I think that's a pretty clear next step for CAC concern.
When they say referred, does that mean it was referred to the village planning board? Because the mayor hasn't said.
This says it requires referral to New York State Department, no, I'm reading the wrong one. Yeah, New York State Department of Health and the Village of Millbrook as the subject property is located within Zone 3 of the Village of Millbrook Watershed Protection Zone.
That's
So
why
if
it's
that hasn't
done.
happened, that's
It does happen. Mike takes care of that normally.
Normally it's it goes to the office, and then normally that I'm.
Aaron is going to take care of it now.
Could it be that there was information that went to the village and I never received it? Absolutely. So I don't want to say that, that they're at fault, because I don't know that they are.
no.
I don't think
that would be a pretty
Yeah.
important thing.
I don't
to
think
know.
I think it's going to go. Like they've just come before the planning board. Now they're going to do the steps.
Yeah, okay, and I don't know if that, traditionally what that meant was, because that's one of the reasons I'm supposed to be on this board, is that when it goes to the planning board, I'm the voice for the village on
Right.
the fact that, what are the adverse effects potentially for the water?
Right.
And, that's why, that I was one of the reasons that there's always been a village resident, representative.
Yep. No, that's perfect.
Well, my other question of clarification was, my understanding is that they did not approve they're not asking for any approval of any building or
Nope.
building envelopes. And so
Nope.
we don't know, but they're all big enough that there could be the
So it's-
required variance.
It's 10 acre zoning. So each parcel
Bigger
is
than that.
about 100 acres, just roughly. And let's say half of it's buildable, they could put 5 houses there. But that's not what they're asking to do. They're splitting it up between the family. Each person is taking their share, and they just want to subdivide it now. They also know that that can't be subdivided for another 10 years, each parcel.
Afterwards.
So
But it
but they
will
still
still
have the
be-
right to build a house or
Right.
something if they want.
But it will still always, it's still going to be subject to the zoning and the
Correct.
planning board code.
Correct.
So it's,
It all has to be
Yeah.
taken care of, correct?
But also, if the environmentally sensitive areas would fall under New York state law, or possibly even federal law.
Right.
Like someone at the end of Deheim Road where we live, she was irritated that someone was letting people shoot ducks. So she hired somebody to come and pull out the beaver dam, which is completely illegal.
Illegal,
Right,
yes.
exactly,
Yes.
Might fall under the
Remember that one?
EPA. Somebody would have to get the EPA involved.
Somebody did call the EPA.
Yeah.
Finally, somebody did something about it.
Yeah.
One of our neighbors called the EPA.
Which gets back to the bog turtle. That was the case way back with the EPA involved with the bog turtle. So this is what we're talking about, the NRI. Somebody has to actually make sure these things are enforced, and there has to be language somewhere.
I think with our NRI that we're going to do our best to get everything written down. And
This would be a CAC recommendation, by the way.
yes,
And a lot of times, Howard can back me up or say it, not really, but I know a lot of times when things were ever referred back to the DEC for review and whatever, very little happened. Most of the time, they got a pass, so to speak.
right.
Gee,
It
what a
had to be-
shock, an
it had to
environment,
be-
government
It
agency.
had to be pretty egregious to be able to
Yeah.
do that, that
Yeah,
type
but
of-
the NRI is definitely quite vital at this point because the comprehensive plan review, it's again and again been brought forward that nothing really should be done until this NRI is completed, and it should be as thorough as possible, and we're kind of on top of that. But Leslie will be here soon and we'll all talk about that.
Just out of curiosity, if you have the code that says you're supposed to do this under the NRI, and you don't have an NRI yet, but doesn't that cover whatever you get done under the NRI then? Something like that, language-wise?
Yeah.
If it says in the comprehensive plan or whatever, our position is that we will enforce all the NRI provisions.
The NRI isn't a,
I'm just using
It's
that
not-
as an example.
provision. I mean,
It's more of a-
factual.
it's a fact- it's fact.
literally an inventory. Then you have to draft a law to
Yes.
protect whatever is
What's
in
in
the
inventory.
inventory.
But
Which we already have, if they do discover that bog turtles are actually using any of this land,
Mhm.
those laws are in place.
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I'm
And they
sort
would
of
be-
getting at, the cart
Yeah.
before the horse or the horse
Yeah.
in back of the cart, you know, which comes
The
first.
cart before the horse. Yeah.
or the chicken or the egg. All right, so let's go to the next thing.
All right, now, let's skip around a little, because some of these didn't apply, and so we don't need them, there's a couple of
Most of them,
construction items and neighbor things. The DLC, our friend down the road, the DLC, Dutchess Land Conservancy, is taking over the Perkins property for educational uses and so on. And what came up at the meeting is the same thing that came up in other places. It's in a sensitive, rural, kind of darkish area of the town. It's not like the village or something. So the lighting came up again. Before we even had heard too much from the planning board, the guy who was doing it said, we're going to have dark sky lighting, which showed a good intent right away. So the other types of questions that came up was shielding for glare, what temperature do you want on the lighting, and so on. And I would say that we would, as a CAC, would probably recommend at least the standards met by Ruge and Hammond, which had shielding for glare, had a color temperature of, I think, 3000 K, which is a little bright, actually. But this guy said it would be 2.7 or 2.5, which is more orangish and a little nicer if you're a neighbor. So that sounded kind of good. That was just a workshop, so we'll get another bite at this again, we'll see what he actually comes in with at the planning board meeting next month.
Since it's a public building, they need to have some special lighting.
That parking lots and everything in there.
For
They have
when they're
events and
doing
so
something
on.
at night for their events and then just have walkway lighting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it shouldn't be on all the time. It should only be on when they're.
No, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be
There's
just,
stuff in the
just
code
when they're
anyway that
using,
says you
yeah.
can't have glare
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah,
that. It's in the zoning
it'll be
code,
all
too.
in the code.
Nice not to have to fight with them over it, though.
Well, DLC, I mean, they get it.
No, they understand.
So they seem very cooperative, so that, I would put that on the plus side at the moment till we see what they come in with. And if we don't like this, we as a CAC can make a recommendation again. And sometimes the recommendations get followed, and sometimes they don't. And we were, thanks to Margaret here, very successful with the Ruge, getting most of our recommendations into the plan. So it doesn't always go south. What else do we have that we don't, okay.
Quick question, the location of the Perkins property, is it by how much of the Perkins property is actually the farm? And is it right off of 44? Okay, because that borders 113 acre well area.
On your wetland area? For your,
Yeah, for the pumping station and stuff.
so they're in zone 1 or zone 2? They're zone 2.
They'd be in zone 2, they'd be.
They're
Zone
they're
1
very
is zone-
close, they're very close.
They're very close. In other words, the stream that goes through that farm goes directly into
Yes.
Into the backside
All
of
right,
the
so
water.
then you brought up an interesting point. They said they weren't close to any streams or anything, but depending on, if you park cars around there, no, stuff gets in the ground from cars. Sometimes cars have leaks and all this other stuff. Gets in the ground, and they can go quite a ways in that water table underground. Because I believe there's an
117
aquifer
acres
there.
to get there. Well, it's 117 acres, so it takes, but the stream is, I always get too confused whether it's the Sauk Hill or the other, but one of the streams goes
Yeah.
directly into our containment galleries. So that would be in a very sensitive area. We've had occasional problems with the cows standing in the stream and stuff like that.
Those
So-
cows do that.
As cows do that, I know, but I just wanted to make sure that's something that if it does go to the planning board.
Yeah,
and
but I think it's,
detailed
I think
area would be-
that portion I think is far enough away from the stream and stuff.
Well, okay, so Mike is bringing up the point of groundwater pollution making its way into the water table, not the stream buffer or anything.
Right, yeah, exactly. That would be my only concern, based on how they're going, whatever they're gonna do construction-wise there, that's all.
And how would we address that? Impervious, some sort of paving or something? I'm not sure, that's an engineering question. I don't quite want to be on the record saying this is what you have to do.
That's my league in terms,
That's a concern.
that's a scientific explanation of saying, okay, how many feet do you need for diffusion to make sure that some of these contaminants wouldn't get into the drinking water? But it would be something that would be of concern for us.
Okay. So that's in the minutes.
All right.
That's an important one he brought up.
Yeah, no.
People have to drink that water in the village, all right?
Some of us drink bottled water. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, I'm
All
kidding.
right, the next one is the Upton Lake High School, which I personally am not familiar with. It's located between us and another town someplace, I think.
Over
in
Clinton.
Clinton up there, northeast, or northwest rather.
Mhm.
And it's a high school construction, which is okay. Then we sort of got into the question of lighting again, because high school parking lots and so on, it depends on the district you're in. Some of them turn them off after a certain hour. Some of them leave the lights on all night. Some of them have a partial where the lights get dimmed, and with the new modern, more advanced technologies, they have things like, I think the audio light might have that movie light, where it goes off, and then if somebody comes on the property, it comes on again.
Yeah.
So lighting is going to be something they'll be discussing at the next meeting as well. And we have a long-standing policy of looking at lighting as an environmental issue, man-made environmental. So that's something, for us again.
Perhaps I didn't read it close enough, but how big is the high school going to be? Do we know
Not
how
that
many
big.
kids?
Hi, Leslie.
I didn't think it was going to be that many students.
Not that
No,
big.
No.
they said,
left it open.
they said, yeah, so it's like 31 now, but if they wanted to project a number, they said maybe 90 in the future. But there's,
Building's gonna be,
Big.
it's gonna be big.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
So
not
they're
30
trying to
person
do
building.
parking lot lighting, landscape lighting, what's their lighting?
yeah, just the building lighting and parking lot lighting.
But it's not an environmentally sensitive area,
Mm-mm.
so.
Mm-mm.
14,000
No, it's not an
square
issue, but if people live around there, there's a
I
habitat
don't-
around there.
Yeah, I don't, we'll have to see the plans and
It's a
stuff.
religious high school.
Yeah, it is. It's
Upton Lake Christian.
It's the Christian, yeah, Upton Lake Christian School.
Yeah.
So it's,
It's big.
Well, my personal viewpoint on lighting, this is my viewpoint, is that we are lucky to live in this nice rural town with the aesthetics and so on. And one of the things to me that ruins a place that's like this and makes it into something else is bright lighting.
Mm.
And
Totally
these
agree.
happen sequentially, it's like segmented growth or something. And so I personally am always sensitive about lighting in areas, because I've seen the effects of it in other places, and why go down that path? And if the developers are willing to cooperate, it's so much easier
and they
just
were,
to raise the points
yeah,
with
they,
them.
they already said.
Yeah, they would, they
Yeah.
seem pretty friendly.
Yeah, they already
But,
said.
but a big high school could have water demands, right?
Yeah, they didn't
Mhm.
clarify whether septic's gonna change.
Oh,
Yeah,
man,
because they don't,
need
they don't
to.
know yet,
Mhm.
because they don't know if they're revamping the building or if they're building more than what they want to build, or they said,
Because
with some of
that's something we could comment on, right, is to make sure that the water and septic plans are clear.
That
If
would
they're,
be a Board of Health
if
thing.
they're really,
We could comment, but that would be the board,
Yeah.
up to the Board of Health,
so,
actually.
but this was just a workshop again, so they're not,
Oh, okay.
they don't have an application in
We don't know
yet.
what it's gonna look like. We could certainly raise that point, and do you
Aaron
need
did
Board of
it.
Health standards and so
Yeah, I
on?
think
on
he
the
did, right?
septic?
he did, okay,
Yeah.
If they
all
don't-
right, then I'll,
I think the board,
I-
the planning board
I
is
should-
pretty
I should
good
have read it.
generally by
Yeah.
now. We've gone
Look more
through this at the
closely.
planning board for quite a few years now, and although they got a lot of new members, they're pretty sensitive to that stuff. We may not even have to bring it up.
okay,
Hopefully
all
not.
right.
So there are no plans in terms of
No.
location of this?
No, that was just a workshop.
It's just a
So we
workshop,
can-
they're still in that stage.
I was just more not worried.
I'm
but I
curious,
was just
why does
concerned
Dutchess
about-
Day have their lights on all night long?
Do they? I don't know, I don't go down to that
They
much.
have them on.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, but I had the same thought when we were talking about the DLC and the lighting question. Dutchess Day has very,
Very bright, very bright lights.
I
They,
wonder-
they are technically on timers, or they were.
Technically, I don't think any are
Well,
anymore.
okay, I'm gonna say back when my child was there, they were on timers. When your child was there, probably, we still had timers. So I think when they changed, when I think they, yeah, you, all of you people.
Paying
No, I'm
for
just
those
kidding.
lights.
I think when they changed to those new lights, I feel like the timers kind of either got taken
Fell by the
away.
And they
wayside.
put in the tennis courts too and lit them up and.
Yeah.
I don't think there's lighting on the courts.
I don't remember there being lighting on the courts.
But that parking lot.
Oh, the parking lot
The
spot,
parking
yeah.
lot, and I've always wondered why they have the lights on
Is it bright?
full,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
full
you know,
volume.
It's a cold light.
And it's a
Yeah,
very
and
cold-
it's kind
it's
of like a
very
spaceship
cold.
has landed, because
Yeah.
it's surrounded by
The
dark.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered about that because, I mean, DDS is great. Spenny went there. I love it.
No, no,
But I've
no.
always wondered about that. Why does that campus need to be lit up at
Yeah.
night?
It doesn't.
Security? Is that what they,
Yeah.
what they
I
would
mean,
say?
that was-
Well, I mean,
security?
even a security issue, you don't need it to be lit.
But the wattage doesn't necessarily.
No.
have to have
Lived in an
that.
urban
Mhm.
area,
Is there-
and
what's
used
the
to
code
putting
say
those
about
lights
lighting?
up. and that-
It says that it has to
When
be
they
off
said they wanted
from
those lights.
11 p.m. to 6 a.m. or maybe 7 a.m.
They
So
should be off like
That's
from
what-
9 p.m. too.
it's 11 though, because, you know,
Why?
that's our code.
Can't we ask DDS if they can put a timer on them?
Well, I think we can bring that up to them again because.
Or a motion
Motion,
sensor?
yeah.
Has anybody brought it up to them at all?
No. It just happened to be, yeah, I was gonna say, we just talked to
That's
Matt.
just not a, I mean, that's a building inspector can go and say, hey, your lights are on. and
They're staying on all the time
Even
because
if
they
don't
were
have
on
system lights,
timers.
They would want to conserve as well. and that's-
That's
Well,
a
they're
good
on,
point.
but they're on LEDs now, so then they already think they're conserving.
But I also think it'd be nicer for the herds
more
live on the
expensive than this.
campus.
I would think they would be. the
I
ones
would be
most-
complaining, yeah, I would have been
irritated by it.
complaining if I saw those lights.
If I remember correctly, they just came up when they were doing that stuff. They're supposed to be dark sky compliant. I don't have it,
It's
front
definitely
of
not
them.
dark sky compliant.
but I've kind of stuck in the back of my mind that they said they were going to be dark sky compliant. And I think people neighbors complained about that at the time.
Yeah.
And you're all saying that that's
It
never
used-
been resolved? It's still pretty bright all the time? And it's not,
Well,
or is it just
it's changed.
bright where it's on the ground, but not up in the sky?
Well, I mean,
No,
light
they have
goes
changed
up
the
in
lights
sky
again, yeah, they
because
have
it
changed the
does.
lighting again,
Again, all right.
so that it
No,
has
it's
tops.
shielded. It's
Yeah, it's just shielded, so, but,
So it is bright sky, dark sky compliant.
so I think it's no longer on the timers, and we'll probably just mention it to them, and,
Yeah, I think,
yeah, I think they'll be totally on top of
well, I
that.
do think if that's something that, if there's other towns or areas that you all know that have, I think everybody would agree that the lighting is something that's important to this community in terms of maintaining its rural character and keeping it the comprehensive
Right.
plan.
Several
But if
counties
there's
in
something
Vermont
else
have it.
beyond, like if we don't have
Yeah.
just take a note that dark sky is something that's
Yeah,
common and it's not in the code, maybe that's something, as we're looking at the code.
to make sure it's worded that way, but
making
I,
a list of things that
think
we
it
might want to
is.
consider.
Can't
Question.
tell up to Mike
Is
that
it
you like
physically
this if you
mentioned
don't
in
have
the
Dutchess
code
Day
with that
compliance.
terminology?
Well,
It is.
even the
Correct.
high
Dark
school-
sky.
Oh, perfect.
Right.
Yeah, the high
You know,
school's
the high
lit up
school
like
is
a
yeah,
pretty
the
bright.
high school
Christmas
down here,
tree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thing is, any code goes out the window if somebody says there's
You're saying
a
it says
safety
dark sky?
issue.
in it?
If somebody
Yeah.
says there's a safety issue. then-
Right, but the
Good.
safety,
Good.
But it
you-
should still have to
it
have
still
this
has to be
down.
lessened light, but even if it's for safety purposes, it can't be
Well, for
Yeah.
safety
Super
purposes, you
bright.
can have a motion
correct,
sensor.
correct.
Like for vandalism, if they,
Yeah.
so the motion would go off.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm sure they'd have cameras as well.
So before, which totally not part of the conversation, obviously, but Rugies, before their new lot got the lighting put in, somebody robbed all the tires and wheels off of one of the
I
trucks.
Oh my God.
It was horrible. So we're like, I walked by and I was like, oh dear, it's missing all of it. It was up on
Wow.
blocks.
That was a
Brazen.
robbery
That was
took a lot of
extremely
effort.
brazen.
Yeah, that's
It was
Not really, these guys are
extremely,
good at it.
yeah, they did it quickly.
Apparently.
Isn't that horrible?
You guys
Yes.
are pretty fast.
Actually, speaking of lighting, has there been any resolution on the firehouse sign?
Mike?
Resolution, no, in terms of as far as I know, the resolution was that it passed, and it passed based on the parameters that Tim had put in place with how bright it could be, what it could be
size.
on, the size. So
That's
they
unfortunate.
have very definite specifics on what they can order and what can be there. So it hasn't been installed yet, so obviously,
That's too bad.
obviously, we, can't make sure that they're compliant yet, but that is definite. That was what it turned out to be, the compromise.
There was no compromise, basically.
I was reluctant, yes.
Yeah.
Anything else, Howard, on your part?
Well, that's that part. That's what happened at the present meetings that you've not yet given minutes or anything for.
Yeah.
Everything else is pretty much done. You know, they've honored all the wetlands parameters in the other developments, and they were brought up to them. And they always said we're outside the buffer or something other that didn't address us came up with some of the applications. So that's pretty much it for that. The other thing I would like very much to talk about is what happened at the ZBA meeting when they took a look at our request to interpret the Wolf Clock decision. It's already done, so I don't, and it's not the Wolf Clock per se. It's really, where are we going forward with properties like this in the future? And did the Wolf Clock people get what they were entitled to have and no more, or did they get less? I don't think they got less. Or did they get what they were at least entitled to, or did they get a little more? That's an interpretation. The big thing was what the lawyer decision was on this. And we did a lot of work. There's just a little bit of the paper that was generated over time with that place. And we had a site visit and went down there and spent time with it. Steve Marino, as you know, is the wetlands consultant. And he also advised, when he's the wetlands consultant, his original job was to look at the property and where is the wetlands. He delineates them. Then he also has branched into, as part of that wetlands position, to advise on what can be done there with plantings and so on if the applicant wants them, or they can get another company, and then he would judge if the plantings were adequate as well for the wetlands. And he looks at the engineering a little bit. He has one of those firms like, what is it, AKRF, is that the correct title for what Aaron's firm is, that does both sides of the street, so to speak. He represents people like us at boards and so on, and he represents commercial people coming on the other side of the table. So they're well versed on what everything is. So now this is his report from, I think it's the 22nd or so, before coming to the ZBA and planning board. And he writes, the conclusion and recommendation. This is the introduction to what we're going to discuss. The Conservation Advisory Commission is correct in pointing out that under normal circumstances, the existing house and landscape would not be approved under the current town board code. Then he goes on to say, well, it's already there, and there's all sorts of violations on there already, and they're going to improve it. So maybe that's the best way to go, he's saying afterwards, because violations are already there. The biggest violation, by the way, is the septic system, which the Board of Health would probably not let these people live in the house with a failed septic system. So it's really not germane to the issue, but that was part of the discussion. So now we get to, without going through more of this, and I don't want to take too much time. we get to the decision on this, where the attorney for the town decided that we the ZBA had written a letter, had written a letter saying that we would like to review the code, saying that we believe that the code of nonconformity, that you can't expand an existing nonconforming use under Article 391.7 applies here, and we'd like an interpretation how it applies to this property. And we were supposed to have a hearing on that when the application came up. That was supposed to be part of the decision-making process. Only 3 of the 5 board members were there. John Parisi, the chairman of the board, the ZBA, decided that, well, since they're here, let's finish that application, and they granted them an approval and put off the request to interpret 391.7 to the next meeting when all the board members were present. So that now fell into October. They were approved in September. Okay, so we're at the meeting and discussing this, and the town attorney had taken the position at the September meeting at the ZBA that because they were a residential property, being in the wetlands didn't apply to them. Because they were in there, their use was residential, so they were not non-conforming, because residential is allowed in the zone. But it's also possible, this is one of our contentions, that other parts of the zoning code can apply to them. In other words, you can be exempt from one part of the zoning code, but not the other parts that you're not exempt from. And the fact that they're non-conforming under the wetlands, or they state that properties that are there before the wetlands law was passed, pre-existing, can stay there, but they're not conforming properties and have to be dealt with accordingly according to the wetlands code. So now you have 2 different things there. You have, now this is the odd part here. The attorney says the request for an area variance issued by the ZBA will allow for the physical owner to use the land in a manner that is not allowed by the dimensions or physical requirements of the zoning code. That means it's not conforming. That's the definition of non-conforming. The facts present in the application did not warrant the requirement of a special permit under 391 because it is an extension of the enlargement of a conforming structure with a conforming use. Now, this is a little trickier part still. However, if an enlargement of the structure is contemplated in the future, then it is likely that 391.7 will apply since the granted variance will have created a nonconformity in the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense because the variance that they were approving was already for a nonconforming structure because they were already in violation of the setback code. And they wanted to expand the setback code further, making it more nonconforming. And the code says you can't make it more nonconforming if it's already conforming.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sort of like a conflict there. So there's 2 parts. There's the conflict of taking a property that's over the existing property, the one that exists already, the one that we have that big map for somewhere that exists over here. And Margaret was nice enough to delineate it. But this is the smaller version which you can pass around. And it shows the existing property already in the setback violation. So that's a legal technical part as to why it can't be, that's one of the reasons why it can't be granted that we should discuss, but this will come up again with some of these properties.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to predate, that's the concern. It's not that we want to change anything for these people necessarily. They should get what they're entitled to. But this is setting a precedent again, that they can further enlarge the non-conforming properties setbacks, and even though they're already in a non-conforming use. And this is what they did here.
I have a clarifying question. The sentence you read that is confusing.
Yes,
I
it
agree.
is confusing.
Is it, I had interpreted that when I read it the first time, was that they granted them the variance based on the setback and the fact that they're in the setback, which was subject to the 25%, and they're close to the 25%. So my understanding was that if they enlarged it again, they would be over the 25%.
That's what the attorney is saying.
And then they would be non-conforming.
But they've already got a non-conforming property because the setback is not there. So it doesn't matter what they're doing, this property is non-conforming because it doesn't have a setback. But plus it doesn't have a wetlands permit before.
But they won't be able to expand it further because it would be
That's the second.
beyond the 25%.
That's the second part. The first part is based on setback only. There's another part is based on the wetlands law. That's what we're going to sort of discuss after. The fact that this property exists already in the setback areas, whether they built before or after makes the property non-conforming at the start. So they're jumping over that to do this. They've already got the non-conforming property and they're enlarging it.
They're pushing it
It's a horse because of the
further
plot thing
back
again.
from the water body, and actually.
No,
it's
no,
not
no, no,
technically
that's not what they're doing.
it's
In
a
this,
water body.
in this part of the
They're moving
argument,
it 9 feet back.
no, that's not the
Moving it 9
argument
feet
here.
back.
No, you're missing the point. It's the side variance to the other property. The property that is on, not the wetlands or pond. It's the side of
Right.
the neighboring property. They're too close to the
That's what they
setback
got
on
the
the
variance
neighboring
for.
Right, well,
property.
that's what they got a variance for.
But it says that you can't do that. It's a non-conforming, other part of the code says you can't enlarge non-conforming uses.
It's not a non-conforming use, is the whole point
Well,
of the
non-conforming, what
argument.
does it say? It says something about no non-conforming, well, I have to
I
dig it
think,
out.
and I don't mean to contradict you, and I'm just.
No, but we're discussing it, I could be wrong.
I know that we went to the interpretation, and the ZBA heard from the town's lawyer and from the consultant, and I know everybody has different, perhaps interpretations of the code or their decisions, and that is the right of this group, but I just mindful of the time. Maybe I can get my report, and then just because I was here for 3 hours last night, and I have kids at home, my husband's away, who are not so happy that I'm.
And we can come back to this, right?
Yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah, all
So-
right. Here's what it says, by the way, to answer your question. It says no building or other structure or part of it devoted to a non-conforming use. That building, it doesn't have the proper setback. It's a non-conforming use. Just like
She
you
said
have a
it's not a
property.
non-conforming use. She's very clear in this, that she said it is a non-conforming building, but not a non-conforming use, because it's still residential.
It says no building or, it's a building. The building is not in compliance. However way you want to read this, that building is out of compliance as many other buildings are because it doesn't have the proper setback. And it says you
She's
can't
saying it's
enlarge
not a
them.
use. And that's the difference, is that it's not a non-conforming use.
There's between a non-conforming building and a non-conforming use.
It's not turning it into business. It's still residential. The use is residential. It's zoned to be residential. I mean, I'm just saying what she's
I
saying.
know that's
is
your
that-
argument, but it doesn't
And that's
say
what she
that.
said in September, and that's what
I
they
know.
voted based on,
Right.
is the use of the word use.
Right.
And that's why the wetlands also, or that's why that she said they didn't necessarily even have to stick to the 25%.
Huh.
Because
You're saying they could enlarge it more than
I'm
that?
saying that's what came up in
That's what she said,
September,
yeah.
was that this, because the code specifically says non-conforming use, and this is in fact a non-conforming building, but a conforming use, that it could be worse than it is.
Well, under the wetlands, it says non-conforming
But
use, so it's
so the-
devoted to, that's the second part of the argument, but the first part, I'm still going back to the first part.
But
If there's something here, because it seems like there's a code that's being interpreted
Right.
differently by people here and by council,
right.
it would be terrific if there's suggestions or feedback about ways that can be more clear. Since
Right.
there's concern about there being a precedent being
So-
set
right.
here.
So
That question was asked, by the way, and also answered by council, that because of this unique set of facts, it
Right.
wouldn't necessarily create precedent.
I don't know if I can find it,
No,
have an
I
opinion
agree
from
with
it.
analysis.
But
Have
the
another opinion
thing, but
from
the
it.
thing is in the code, if you take each of those words, if you take use, building, or lot, or whatever it is in nonconformity, and you use it as a sentence with just that one word, you get the correct reading of the code. It's because it says building, use, and lot together that people tend to separate it out and say, well, no, this use is still okay, but the building that, it's
Well, that's
each
why I
word.
to
Clarify, and.
Yeah, because
and
each
I
word,
think that
if
we
you
could
take it
draft
separately,
language
then it
To
is,
fix the problem.
correct,
And-
it is
and-
a,
and
it is
send
a,
to
it is
them.
language.
Yeah.
It is
That would be
language.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
thank you,
looking
Pam.
at the code. This is something that's going to creep up again. It
Yeah,
was-
it's
Sure.
a
It's
language.
understanding what and I wasn't here when
Correct.
the code was written, obviously.
No.
The intent, what's behind the
No,
code.
correct.
What do we really want? What are we trying to say?
Yeah.
Correct. And that's what it is.
I
It's a
think what we're
language.
trying to say, that those buildings that were in the wetland
No, I know.
buffer.
No, don't go on that again.
Howard,
But what we're saying
we can
is that
do
if the
is-
code's
is-
language is written differently, then you would say, this building is non-conforming because it's written, the building is not conforming, not the use, the building, the
Yeah,
lot.
It's, all we need to do is draft, it's a follow-up letter
Correct.
to our first letter.
Correct.
That says, we understand the decision is X.
And it's
And if
Beautiful.
we think that this would be a better interpretation, and this is the language that would fix it.
would settle any issue
Yeah, okay. we
by
can do
changing
that.
the code language.
All right.
Not a
I think
problem.
that's helpful,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
this, I don't know if this is gonna work or not. I did reach out to some other towns, and one or two of them wrote back, and one of them said, the definition defines non-conforming structures as follows. Non-conforming building or structure, a building or structure which contains a permitted use but does not meet the setback, side yard, rear height, coverage, et cetera, is stores of this local law is distinct as which it is located. The town's attorney argument applies that use does not change. I agree the old use did not change. If it were residential, it remains residential, but the structure by definition does not meet the setback yard and rear height coverage, the floor area, projection, or stories as non-conforming is opposed to the claim made by the town attorney. So the structure is non-conforming, so section 391.7 applies. This is from a zoning share in another town.
Right.
So this is not.
But that's what we're saying, is that the language could change so that that is how it is read as opposed to how we read it.
So my concern,
reads it.
my concern, I don't want to fight with these people who admitted themselves they didn't know what they were getting into because they didn't even know they had a wetlands law to contend with. And I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to be sure it doesn't happen again.
I think also in looking at that application, is that the house was non-conforming. The house also, they were trying to make a bad situation better, right?
Yeah,
They
big difference.
they
That's-
didn't know there was a wetlands law, but actually in response, there is less of their structure in the buffer, in the buffer.
In the
And
buffers,
they are now planting plantings to help bring back.
And to stay away from the wetlands.
And they're taking the septic out of it.
So the idea
And the
that we
septics couldn't
ask a
take it.
resident to move their house.
Never ask them to move, just ask them to take the new house and have it come in the back of the existing house instead of in the middle of it.
This is, that people bought, okay, I mean,
It's not within
It's
our
not,
purview to
it's
do
not,
that.
yep.
And
So
I'm-
our best bet is that we'd like to make as we said, a letter that says we'd like the language to be better, more clear on the explanation of this type of action for the
right.
code.
And so I can draft that for our review before the next meeting.
All right, so
Yeah.
what is the solution? What would we like to see?
There's several things in the code that
Yeah.
are like that.
yeah, I think that'd be really helpful to clarify.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Because I can only say, like, for when I've had to go and do something in the code, I use a highlighter and I highlight the word if it's lot, if it's building, if it's,
Right.
that, and so that the sentence shows, so that you read it as that's what you're talking about, not everything else. Because somebody will eliminate one part of that because they're like, oh, well, all three things don't make what you're talking about. But no, you're talking about the one thing, and if you have to highlight it to show that one
Where
thing.
the
Well, what I read from the other guy is from our code. It's not his code. This is our
Right.
code says that.
But he's saying exactly what we're saying, just so you know.
But the lawyer's also not wrong that the code says exactly what she's saying.
Saying exactly.
So it's
It's the interpretation and the wording needs to
That's
be
why.
fixed.
Right.
yeah.
That's what we're saying.
All right.
So we can,
And NRIs, I can't wait.
so we're moving on. You don't have anything else to say, right?
Well, the other thing I have to say
Hold on, let me
is,
have one more thing quick.
after this, let's go finish this up. This is only on the technical part of the code. There's the wetland section that says it's not conforming as well. What do you do with all the other properties who are gonna come up in the future in the wetlands area?
Each one is going to be treated individually. And hopefully we'll
Based on
fix
the
fix some wording by then. So,
I think any code, and this
Yeah.
is just overall conceptual statement, I think any code is going to be changing given the times, given people's education, given new technology, given a whole lot of factors. So just saying, well, the code's gonna be this, and therefore the next time we do it this way, there's no chance it can get screwed up or misinterpreted. That's never gonna happen, because you're dealing with a change in plane.
And the wetland code as written right now would allow the planning board to do exactly what they did.
Right.
They had the
They-
wetland scientists say this is actually going to make it better.
Better.
So you're saying, just for purposes and whatever for discussion, that if Steve Marino says it's okay, they get to do it.
If the planning board hired a scientist and has a consultant come in and say that this is something that is not going to endanger the wetland further and is actually going to improve it, then the code suggests that it is in their
Well,
purview
the
to
other part of
improve
the
it.
code says if you can do it elsewhere, you should do it elsewhere first. And they could do it elsewhere. They just wanted it in that spot. And that's not what the code was
Howard,
for.
I often agree with you on things. I agree with you on a lot of things. I actually do think the fact that they're ameliorating the situation and actually making the wetland healthier and taking the septic out, I think that's actually a better
Well, the septic's a
choice.
water health issue, but the other part is.
No, I know, but like they're taking, like that they're making the wetland better. I think that's, personally, I think that's a better choice.
All right, so okay, if this is what defines, what is making a wetlands better, according to nationals like a Michael Clemens, for example, who was very instrumental in the wetlands law. Mike Clemens, remember him? The best wetlands are the ones that are left naturally and not disturbed at all. Those are the healthiest wetlands.
That makes sense.
So
That makes
if
sense.
somebody
but-
comes into a wetland and they're gonna do this and make
That
it
ship has
nicer,
sailed.
But they've
prettier,
I know.
ameliorated.
is that making it better?
Ship has
I know.
sailed.
Yeah,
I
I was
know.
gonna say that, the
Yeah.
Shannon's point of that ship has already
It's
sailed.
sailed and it's gone.
Is gone, and we're still gonna be dealing with old houses that have been here for 100 years
Right.
that, didn't know wetlands, what the heck? are they?
Yeah, and they built them where they built them because the water was there.
Yeah, so,
And then bury the protein tanks.
Correct.
You do the best you can with what you got,
Correct.
okay?
And we'll move forward. Anything else to say before we go on?
I could, but I'll let you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
We appreciate that.
Howard, you're the best.
So we're going, you're doing a great job, Howard, really. Leslie, we're going on because we skipped around, waiting for you. So the natural resources inventory and the code maps and the CSC is all in one go.
Okay, great.
Make it go.
So let's start with maps. So one of the things that we're working on right now coming out of recommendations from PACE for updates to the website. So we have a small task force that is a planning board member and a zoning board member, and then Mary, me, Kristen, and James Finley to look at all of our forms and our processes. One of the things I asked Margaret if the CAC would be willing to take on, and hold on to your hats, because it's actually really helpful, is looking at the definitions and the mission statements for each of the boards. That actually is part of the CAC's charge, is to make sure that the town's maps are updated. So we have these maps from Nan Stoltenberg. We have the old maps. So the idea would be for the CAC to kind of look and see, compare the two and see make sure we have the most updated ones. That's just tackling what we have right now. So that's just trying to get us into 2023 with the most updated things that we have. That's one piece of it. Then, as we're looking to the CSC, and thank you again to Pam and Shannon for joining that call on Friday, we have a task force that's going to be working on CSC projects. We have Eleanor Peck from the DEC joining us on Friday, just to show everybody how it works, what we get different points for. One of the things that we've talked about as a priority, both because it gives us a lot of points towards a certification, but more importantly, because it was a recommendation coming from NAN and the CPRC report, is doing a natural resource inventory. The DEC is offering a grant for joint municipalities to jointly apply to do a joint NRI. The village qualifies as a separate municipality, so we started there. We went kind of back and forth in discussions with them. Mike, thank you so much for helping to kind of facilitate and quarterback that. We got Jen Glasson and I had a call with Ingrid Hackle, who's sort of overseeing the NRI joint program, the NRI grant program. I swear I have no plans tonight.
No, I know.
Shannon, go home and call your car.
Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. NRI grant program, and after, Jen understanding what it entailed and how we would work, because there was a concern in the village a little bit, there's so many projects going on that this would just be a lot, because the DEC is really just providing kind of technical assistance and drafting, but kind of getting more information from the DEC on exactly what that looks like. We all decided that with our task force, that we could absolutely handle that. To make our application stronger, they suggested that we find another municipality also to join, because I guess when Rhinebeck did it, they had their village and then the town of Rhinebeck. Margaret had already been approached by the town of Clinton. They are part of the Hudson River estuary. And so Clinton will be joining us. It'll be the three of us in this application. It's due at the end of the month. It's actually, thankfully, not a very onerous application. Margaret's in touch with Clinton. It's a tremendous amount of work getting them on board, and they're going to give us, each municipality has to have 3 to 5 people that are sort of people of record for the NRI. They're giving us some people, and then we have a group of us. Richard Phillips has agreed to help. Adelaide, Camillo, me, Margaret, Jen Glasson, Shannon, Adu, and a new recruit that Shannon has, Peter Rothman, who will be helping as well. And anybody who wants to help, because as this unfolds, for example, they said, we went turn to you and say, we need some historical background and somebody to draft that. So maybe we could, try to strong arm David Greenwood to give us some information. Whoever we need to reach out to, we'll just sort of cobble that all together. But that, I feel like we have a pretty good shot at getting the grant. Now within that, what they're really doing, the DEC, is just looking at our maps in detail. So within what Margaret did, by the way, Margaret hosted and organized the whole thing with Michael Clemens, who's really has a tremendous background as an environmentalist and also has served on several boards in Salisbury, planning, zoning, all kinds of things. He is going to come speak to you all in December and kind of give the CAC sort of an overview of best practices for NRIs, meaning what components do we really have within our NRI. And the way the DEC explained it to us is they're like technical drafting and map assistance. If there's things within that we want to supplement as an appendix to that document, different studies and things, that would be for us to work on and facilitate. So with that, Michael has given us kind of, you may want to do this, you may want to do this, you may want to do this. One of the things that came up was a habitat map study that Sonia had done 20 years ago. So do we need that to be updated? So I contacted when Gretchen Stevens with Hudsonia to say it's been 20 years, Gretchen. She's still there, she works at BARD and Hudsonia. And I said, how would we go about having this updated? And she said, listen, things don't change that much over the course of 20 years, unless there's been a big development done, or if a meadow that was once mowed is no longer mowed, it goes from meadow to shrub to forest, she said. So other than those circumstances, she said, we don't have to redo the whole thing. And I guess Stanford has also approached her, but we also approached Stanford, by the way, to be part of our joint application, but they just received their own grant money through their own NRI, and they also reached out to Hudsonia for an update on their habitat maps and spoke to Gretchen. So she gave us kind of a ballpark figure based on Stanford. They're quoting $8,900. Margaret and I kind of threw out maybe $10,000 for the town of Washington. And they would come back and say, okay, what's been built in the last 20 years? What was once mowed that isn't? And kind of give us an update to our habitat map. In addition to that, it would be great to have some more information on water. So she said we'd hire a hydrogeologist for that, but there's also a New York State rural water system thing. I made a note of it. She gave me a contact there, and there's also a separate program that New York State is doing to analyze drinking water. And I thought that might be something that the CSC or CAC, that's separate from the NRI. Well, it could be separate from the NRI,
A supplement to it.
A supplement to it, and or just something that we all would want to know, particularly, I think residents, if we're doing something with the village jointly, which we're hoping, which we are in this application, would want to know. I know during my town board campaign, knocking on doors, particularly people that lived on Alden Place. Did you do doors with me in Alden? I can't remember who it was. They all complained about the smell to the water and issues with water on Alden Place. So I think it would just be,
And also, one man actually told me that sometimes the water kind of burns.
oh, when he takes a shower. Yeah. You told me that. And we would divide and
Scary.
conquer, do separate sides of the street. So I didn't listen to it. Like, here's the issues. There's a lot of water issues. There's a lot of water issues on all like. So anyway, I think it'd be worthwhile for us to understand. We had a drought last summer. You know, how is the water, how is the water quantity and quality, if at all, changed in recent times? So, and Michael has other suggested studies. We'll cover that in December, and that would come out at NRI, but that would not be included in this grant. That would be things that we'd have to, I'd like to have a running tally and then see if we can, you know, figure out how to
Give people,
you know,
get people
how much pay for it.
involved and have little subcommittees that go and do these little projects to add them to our NRI,
Yeah,
to make it a well-balanced.
So the idea would be a separate, like appendix to the NRI on water, or would it be a separate?
so within it, like within the NRI, they're gonna look at our map. So if there's a water map, for example, we could then have as an appendix to that, you know, here's the water study, the quality of the water. For example, and I don't know, but this is what I think the hydrogeologist does. They're gonna look at the flow of the water, and I think they would also look at the quantity of the water, and particularly, I think, as it relates to the aquifer. I mean, I would assume they're looking at flow and they're looking at quantity.
There was
And
also a
there's
study
separate
about that.
drinking water. There's a separate drinking water, sorry to interrupt you, there's a separate drinking water, forget about
Study.
flow and quantity that New York State provides an analysis of. And I know that the water is always, I'm sure, tested every year, and they do,
Water is tested.
yeah,
constantly.
I'm
Constantly.
sure.
Not
So
yearly,
it might
it's
be,
a lot.
you know, not, because the village has its own water system, it might be more of a town thing with I don't know, I don't know how it works, I just know that it's one of the things that Michael mentioned in his thing.
Okay,
And that's an addendum to some.
But anything,
You're always gonna have differences because when you're dealing with village water,
Yeah,
okay, you've got it coming in from some of the other sources that are also pertinent to town. But everybody's well goes through a different geology as they get it up out of the ground, okay? So you're gonna have all sorts of variations in terms of the different mineral components that you're getting in any property on the town. And we publish a yearly study in the village, but they're constantly monitoring the amount of minerals, because obviously there are certain minerals like iron that you can't have too heavy a quantity of, or else it will affect your ability to drink the water, period, that type of thing.
well, it might make more sense because everybody sort of outside of the village has a well, and we're not on a water, system.
That's right.
So maybe if that New York State, I just got the referral, there's a rural one, which is the one that she's talking about, but there's also one just about drinking water. That might be something I can forward to you, the village, if you guys are interested. Maybe you don't even need it, but they're doing free, assessments on that, so.
Yeah, we get all of our assessments based on the standards from New York State.
Oh, great, and you guys are probably already doing it.
With VRI, so
Yeah.
we can't function as a municipal water supply without following all of the New York State standards for every category, minerality, pollution, contaminants, everything. So that,
Sure.
and that's standard, and that's standard for anyone who's a water supplier. Okay, and that's the difference between getting town water on a private well and getting public water supply. You get the.
Well, I don't know, because I just know, so I just know that those are the two things they said. You can test your drinking water, and they'll do that, and they'll do this other thing. May not make sense for us to do it because we're already doing it, but the water flows and quantities, I think probably would make sense, particularly as different developments are being considered different parts of town, just to understand what's there, and how that connects to, in terms of access to water and where that connects to other.
That's a very important thing.
Yeah.
I think since our source water protection law was passed back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
That basically, and keeping in mind that we are not this is a very common mistake. We are not an aquifer-based, system. We are a groundwater-based
Right.
system, okay? So everything we get that goes into the drinking water comes from streams and creeks. And of course, there's underground supplies, but the containment galleries are less than 20 feet below the ground. So you're not getting, that's where you're getting your water from. And most people, when you say aquifer, they think of some huge body of water, 200 feet
Yeah.
down, 300 feet down, whatever that you're plugging into. And that's not the case with the village, and that's not the case with many of the private wells that people are sinking into. They're not sinking into some big pool of water. They're sinking into a lot of underground streams and a lot of things that are coming in different and pooling in different areas, and that you can suck in from the different strata of rock and whatever,
Yeah.
depending how far you go down. So it's it's complicated, but that's also why there are New York State standards.
Yeah.
Because New York State determines exactly how much of what you can have in the water. And don't forget that when you put a private water sample into the Department of Health and say, okay, is this going to be an okay well because of this? They have to follow New York State standards too. They may tell you, well, you may want to filter for sulfur, you may want to filter for this, for that, depending on what's in your water. But basically, there are standards that say, no, there's too much iron here. Or perfect example, I got a grant because we were on groundwater influence, and that's one of the reasons why we were having our chops busted for years by the Department of Health, because it was groundwater based. We tried to drill the well. We went down 700 feet trying to go down to get a deep water source, and we hit radon, which automatically means that once you hit radiolicals, let's say it properly, radiolicals like that, you automatically have to have filter system. Period. End of story. So the chance that we would have to go way down and be able to avoid this under the influence of groundwater went away. And we had to, have a filter system for Cryptosporidia and Giardia.
Yeah.
But we don't have, but there's no radon on the water on the surface level. We're not far enough. That's one of the issues you deal with. And it's complicated because there's just so many influences in what the water can get contaminated with. It varies.
Well, the drinking water, we're going to table that because that I don't think is maybe something that we need to do.
There's a map someplace that was done, and maybe David has Greenwood, which told, depending on how much type of soil you have, how much water you're going to get absorbed through that soil. And that dictates what kind of house you could put in the soil. It's probably downstairs. I hope it's still downstairs. And most of the town was exempt from that because the zoning was so large. It didn't restrict too much of the building anywhere. Somebody did that, I'm going to say 20 or 30 years ago, and I remember seeing it. So where is the map now? I don't know, but it was done. And at the time, the town passed because of the large zoning. So there were a few restrictions. But you might want to be aware of that so you don't wind up with another Migdale type thing where you have a large piece of property sitting over a place where the soil type is not conducive to water infiltrating in large numbers.
Yeah. I think that's what the hydrogeologist will do. I think that's part of what the rural agricultural water assessment program that they are doing. It's EPA program, according to Gretchen. So all she did was send it to me today and told me to look into it. So that's something I learn more on this part of the task.
That's something you can probably do, is based on GIS data, so I'm assuming a qualified person could do that.
But I think that's all I have, right? We're working on
So that's it. So the first half of the NRI, the first 6 months is basically doing the mapping. So if we have any other small projects like the water or anything else that we can add to the data of the NRI, then we can have a more full NRI. And so that's why we're saying is if we can get these other little subcommittees working on anything else that will be a benefit to the overall picture of the NRI, we've got 6 months to get into that before we have to present the data to them to finish the report.
And what Gretchen said to me is like, I said, oh, we can help you with field studies. She's like, no, the experts do that. So it's really just us identifying who's the right person and getting finding the funding to do it. And if I had a tally for everything, and we could try to, then I could sort of figure out the right foundation, another approach to figure out how to get the money for it. But And then I guess the other piece for our CSC meeting on Friday, I think I might have mentioned, but as Eleanor walks us through it, just having a conversation with that group, what the goals would be for 2023. Besides the NRI, we get points for creating a task force, we get points for the coordinator. Margaret and I will be the coordinator of record. All that means is that I post the resolutions onto the portal, so we get credit for them. And not, and maybe setting the meetings, other than that, because there's just a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other, we're all gonna try to spread that out.
Spread the love.
And I think that's it. And then the mapping, just thank you for
Yeah.
that. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. We did up the CPRC maps for the town, and then we'll get that from using Nan's maps.
Yeah.
We'll use that to look into the old maps. If anyone wants to look at maps, let me know. And I
You
will.
should definitely get some
Yeah.
recruits.
Oh, no, I know. And you have to have more than one set of eyes, needless to say,
Right.
because you don't see things always, and somebody else will pick them up. So definitely going to be using other eyes. I'm going to say, and then I will be emailing out Michael's report to everyone to give you a heads up of what he's going to talk about at the next meeting.
Okay.
And if you have any questions that you might want to ask based on, all of this. So that'll be the next thing.
Did you want to invite,
I'm going to invite all the boards.
yeah, that's great.
Yep, and the public,
And the
obviously.
public, yeah, I think
It's gonna be,
that's
it's gonna be announced, but I will get it to you guys first, but it will be posted onto the town's website so people can read it and then if they have questions and want to attend.
I'll mention, because someone else asked me about this, and our Zoom ended before the board meeting officially ended, whenever that was.
Mm-hmm.
That the board agreed to adopt the report, the CPRC's report, as an appendix
Right.
to the comprehensive plan. And a public hearing has been set for December for that. So people have
Thank you.
questions or concerns or comments.
I don't know who it was that ended that meeting.
The December,
I think actually I wonder if the CAC shouldn't write a letter recommending, saying that we recommend that should be appended to the comprehensive plan.
or if there's anything else that you have a recommendation on that you look through and you're just, I don't know, I'm not, I don't want to cross the line of telling you all what to do or what your opinions are, but I think that a letter would be great. It'd be great to have something, or come either speak collectively at the CAC voice or come as individual residents and ask comments.
The reason why I think it's important to have it as an appendix or appended to the comprehensive plan is because then it sort of updates that part of the hospitality part that we all talked about, and it's a form of updating the comprehensive plan without opening the whole thing up. Does that make sense?
Well, for example, here's some things that I see as that could be CAC related. There's a recommendation there about scale being relative to the environmental sensitivity of an area, for example. How are we supposed to measure that? So if there's a recommendation on what classifies something as an environmentally sensitive area, and maybe that's something Michael can advise us on.
Right.
Like, does it mean water? Does it mean habitat? Probably means both.
All of it.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think it would be helpful at least I think it'd be helpful as a town board member, for the town board to sort of have and maybe there's a standard for that actually somewhere that I just don't know, because I don't know about, that there's drinking water,
Yeah.
Studies and stuff. So maybe there is a standard that is, it explains what in New York State law, what it means to be environmentally sensitive.
I think this is where the NRI comes in,
Mhm.
because once we have the NRI, then the CAC will make strong recommendations to designate critical environmental areas, which is, if you go through the comprehensive plan, one of the gaps is that such areas were never designated, despite, the thinking that it was a good thing to do.
Right.
So
Well, that would be
I
great, that maybe that part of the recommendation would be to just halt any
We actually put that,
designations until
we put that in our recommendation already, I believe, did we not, our letter?
I think so.
That said, please wait until the NRI is completed before.
Maybe, I don't
We
remember.
can recirculate
And,
that
and,
letter.
and maybe you did make the connect between that recommendation, environmentally sensitive, and that document.
I think so. But
Um,
we can top this up.
And I think
definitely.
now, also now, because the NRI is not just something theoretical. Like
That
we
everyone
actually
keeps
have
saying.
We have a grant that we're gonna.
It's actually
put
in
We've
works.
had a lot of contact with them.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
we pretty good shot.
Yeah.
Of getting it, and if we don't get it, we know where to go to get one done, and we can figure out how to take that step.
Yeah, there's a big difference now. I think there's a general awareness of how important the NRI is. And I think at the time we wrote the first letter, that wasn't as well known.
Right.
So we can sort of remind people.
I think it would be great.
Okay, so I can revise that and update, and with an eye towards submitting it back for the public hearing.
For the public hearing.
For the town
Or
boards,
you
the
can
public
do it
hearing.
after the public, like, I don't think there's any rush for a CAC letter. It could be anytime, a few days before, a few days after, I think just
Yeah,
by the end of this
Just to have
calendar year.
a draft of it ready.
What might be interesting is if, when you have your presentation with Michael Clemens, connecting it then too, right?
Right.
Saying, we made a recommendation in our letter in May, the importance of this to take place. It shouldn't take too long, because really what they're doing is looking at our maps. I mean,
Right.
the studies, and I felt better talking to Gretchen of, I really highly doubt it changed that much in 20 years unless there's been some
Something
significant,
something
new
drastic happened.
housing development, what there isn't in Millburg. But
Yeah.
there'll be some changes, but she said that they will not be
Huge.
dramatic in any way, and those things that are there, But the water thing, she said, may have changed, in terms of quantity and
Yeah.
flow and stuff like that, so.
Her stuff was habitat, but not necessarily presence, right? So the swamp's there, but the bog turtle may or may not be.
Correct.
Right,
So that is still which also, they conclude that you need to protect sensitive areas, but they don't define sensitive areas. They define what the habitats are.
right.
And so the town might say that there's only 3 fens, those are very sensitive because there aren't that many, but the document doesn't really give us guidance on whether or not that's what we would want to do. It would be
Which, you mean the current Hudsonia?
Hudsonia
report?
one, yeah. So it may be not worth updating it for the exact same thing,
Okay,
but trying to get it pushed a little further to, so if there are these, there's a map that's just fens, which I'm picking out because it's something that I didn't know we had fens,
Yeah,
and there aren't that many of them. And if they're critical habitat, what is it that they're critical habitat for? Because that would give us a better idea of whether or not fens or something we want to treat as environmentally sensitive,
yeah.
which
I
may
don't
just
know.
be based on biodiversity.
Yeah, right.
I think there's a lot of value identification in coming up with what those sensitivities actually are.
That gets back to the goal. What is it that we're trying to protect in the end?
Well, to me, it would be species and it would be water, the only thing I'll say is, I think that the town's legislature, which is the town board, I think they'll be amenable to having an NRI be part of the conversation and figuring that out. I don't know I don't know if, saying we have to wait for 2 years to do it. I don't know how long these different studies take. There might have to be updating that happens for something that's more in-depth because, Nan did look at we have some water maps. We got a hydrogeologist. We get some more information about the water, and what she was saying with the habitats. And again, Shannon knows this obviously much more than anyone else in this room, but that, species, they move, but it doesn't mean that is not necessarily a,
They need to be connected somehow.
right habitat for
Yeah.
that or that species. But Shannon, if you know of a different, more in-depth, if Carrie does that or Cornell, right? We actually have a call tomorrow with Cornell, I think, Margaret.
I think so.
Yes, at 11.
At 11.
I mean, there may be some formulas, which are probably the best thing, right? So there may be that and those have changed in the last 20 years. You know, if you have two different patches and they're this far apart and they're this size, then they're not suitable habitat. But if they're closer together or they're bigger, then they are suitable habitat. So there's formulas for interpreting cover into actual use probabilities.
But is there, I guess what I'm asking for sort of the layperson is like, is there like, that's in this study and this takes
There's not, no.
2 years and it's cost this much, like, because I think whatever we can get to get more information to make better decisions, we should
Yeah.
absolutely try to do.
I mean, we could get birds and we could get amphibians in certain places.
Nocturnal life.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different
I mean, listen,
studies.
I know how to get good night vision goggles. If you guys- if that's
Yeah, I know,
what
yeah,
you hear,
yeah, I know how to do
I'm
that.
on board. I just, you know, I just want to keep momentum going, and I want to, if there's another study we want to do, I think we should find out about it and do it.
And then there's a lot that Michael's going to tell us. There's studies that exist that can be connected as well.
Well, I think once everyone sees his memo,
Yeah.
it's extremely
Yeah.
thorough. Like,
Which they'll
they're
see like
different
probably tomorrow.
recommendations.
Sorry, I'm behind on everything.
Well, the town has historically been concerned about water.
Yeah.
As far back as I can remember.
Most important reason.
It is.
And-
Air and water. Yeah, air and water.
And the natural environment has always come second, in my mind at least. The water was important, so I understand that. But I personally would like to see some emphasis on the natural environment being protected as well.
Well, the water's part of the
It's-
natural environment,
well,
so it's of a piece, don't you think?
Say again?
The water's part of the natural environment, so that's can be treated as of a piece.
As a piece, yes, but I think, personally, the fen, for example, that was brought up, and it's a relatively rare environmental piece, and doesn't have a lot to do with water per se as a fen,
Well,
but
I'll tell you exactly what a fen is, because I looked it up.
yes,
A
okay.
fen is, they're important and unique wetland type, are peat-forming wetlands that rely on groundwater input and require thousands of years to develop and cannot be easily restored once destroyed. Fens are also hot spots of diversity. They often are home to rare plants, insects, and small mammals.
Right? But
You guys already
it
knew that.
doesn't impinge on drinking water, which is what the town has always been concerned about.
But it's groundwater.
No, I'm saying as a CAC, there's other things besides
No,
water.
and that's what the natural resource inventory is about. It's about the natural resources, and that's the other portion as well. All right.
Just give you just an update where the village is at this point.
Yeah.
Is the fact that, a week ago, this was like, we're not in, now we are in terms of, Tim's okay with it. I got a template today from Genevieve on, exactly what we can present to the board at next week's
Mhm, great.
meeting to say yes. I answered questions that were on the application in a rough draft fashion. The directions were not clear, so I answered the questions based on a multi-municipality
Yep.
source. So when it said, in this application, blah, 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 then I was like, things like, okay, the town of Clinton, the village of Millburg, and the town of Washington all work on the municipal intermunicipal council that, is basically the watershed. Creek,
Yep.
and we've done X, Y, and Z. So, in a lot of the answers I put down, and Jen's going to go through, I think, with Shannon and she's going to try to tailor what I started with as a rough draft.
Right.
To what we're going to come up with as an application by
Right.
the end of the month.
Right.
But I think there's probably going to have to be a meeting between representatives from the three municipalities to actually look at the wording to make sure and make it as strong as possible for the grant
Correct.
possibility. So
Correct.
I at least got the ball.
Yeah. That's what we just need to get those initial words going.
So
Yeah.
it's there as a starting point.
Thank you.
From a historical perspective.
Right.
I'm one of the few people that actually can look back and say, yes, in 2014 we did this and this.
Right.
So.
That's perfect. Thank you. Quickly going on, because time is flying by.
We're just making up for the meeting that we missed.
I know, apparently. So Leslie, just to drive you
Yeah.
crazy a little bit longer, could you just give us an update on the ash tree removal that you and Walt had mentioned, and then you had said that Jeff
Oh.
Battistoni had come back
Well,
with?
yeah, I think one of the things that, and we're gonna talk about this for all committees, I'm working on kind of an orientation thing.
Mhm.
It was a race, case recommendation, recent recommendation. Is that we kind of have sort of guidelines. So one of the things that the town said is that before anybody applies for a grant or anything, for any of the boards, they just need to get approval from the town board. And so in the case of the ash trees, you know, council's feedback was we need to have a conversation about that to coordinate with, you know, their county roads, there's liability associated with the branches,
Mhm.
and, you know, who's gonna tree removal, who's gonna watch the roads, highway department's gotta be involved. So I think what would make the most sense is actually having that be part of sort of a formal, when I go to them and say, okay, the CSC wants to do these 5 things for certification. Are people on board? Because we're gonna have to find people to invest in those, for example, an energy audit, right? There are companies that do that. It's something that is on the list to be certified. It makes sense, it's good practice. So part of that, and say within that is this ash tree removal, this is what we're thinking of, and the town board can decide whether or not, you know, it wants to, you know, kind of gives the blessing to proceed with that process. What's your timing for that? Is there a set deadline for that grant, or
Which grant are we talking about?
the ash tree removal, that's what you wanted me to
Yeah, and I think that might have passed already.
pass? Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess just in general, if there's other things like that, what I envision is in January, at the beginning of the year, right, we're gonna know about the NRI grant by December. They said it's a very quick
Right.
turnaround. Gotta go to the town board and say, okay, here's our goals for 2023 for the CAC, CSC. CAC might be the ash tree removal, or maybe it would fit within one of the categories for the CSC certification. Obviously, they complement each other, both committees go hand in hand, but we can look at that and then go and get approval and then sort of be off to the races. They just want to know, which actually, according to, you know, the DEC, they're supposed to know. The town board is supposed to be sort of guiding the CSC's activities and just know what they're doing and helping them prioritize. So, you know, the CSC task force will decide what we want to present, and I think some things are natural, like the NRI, for example, probably doing a level set, like doing a lot of these audits. There's a carbon audit, there's an energy audit, would make great sense for us just to figure out where we are. But each of those things costs money, and I'd like to get a list, okay, if the Hudsonia report or the FEN study is gonna cost, you know, whatever we need to do is gonna cost X, and I'm trying to find, you know,
The funding.
some,
Save the fans.
you know,
Save the
guardian
fans
angels to
in the
help
town of
us,
Washington.
fund those things.
Yeah.
That's
Fantastic.
That's my thing. That's my thought.
Ash trees may take care of themselves. They're gonna be a safety issue pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
right.
They're all edged.
Yeah.
Village right now is basically in a separate place. Jen and I are going through the assessment form with Jillian Matthews with Cornell Cooperative Extension. She's going to be finished with us, and with that assessment form, going through all 12 levels and all 100, get the number 110, give or take, different things that you could be looking at as things to do, things you've already done, what you get credit for, and then do it. We're about 10 hours worth of meetings into it. We'll be finished by the end of November, and then Jen is going to be completing her local champions course sometime.
She's been on so many of these, she's a champion. I mean, she's
Oh,
a
yeah,
champion
no,
in more
she
ways
is.
than
No,
one, but
she
she
is.
really has been doing all these trainings and Zooms.
Yeah,
and
no,
all
so
kinds of
she'll
things.
be done with her local champions training by March, the end of March, at which point then, you know, our task force at the village level can kind of go into high gear about starting to meet and starting to look at what kind of things we want to put some kind of attention to immediately. Eleanor kind of intimated to me at a meeting we had with her about 3 weeks ago that essentially we could be if we could get 2 or 3 things done that we're currently working on, we could be at have 4 priorities done within 3 months. Which would
That's
give us, which
terrific.
would give us
Yeah.
$5,000 to $10,000 worth of funding to do
Right.
something with and put it towards something else. So we'll see how that goes. But we're already going through gas house
Yes.
emission survey. That's and I know that Jen has already logged and gone through a lot of the information we have to put out on fuel use, oil use, and all the other things that we have to do for that. We're getting something started with NYSERDA to have that inventory done, and we're going to do an asset review on every building from the NYSERDA standpoint, and have that done in the next few months. And once we get those 2 things, then we can start looking at, okay, well, now we're going to get some money. We'll get between $5,000 and $10,000. Where do you want to spend it? And see where we can then start making actual goals, as well as see where we are on points.
Mhm.
So that's
Perfect.
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are now, which is a good place. Looking forward to seeing how many points we've accumulated at this point.
Yeah.
Because this is not our first rodeo. We've been doing stuff for years,
Right.
and in some cases we did it 5 years ago, and it doesn't count.
Right,
We're not going
exactly.
to get any points. We did it
Exactly.
already. We're not going to get any points for it.
Yep,
So it's kind of a strange animal to work with.
I know. Well, thank you. Going to the subcommittees of tree preservation policy that we were working on at one point, if we want to bring that back up and if we got any updates on it.
We had decided to kind of put that aside while we focused on the CSC and the NRI.
Right. And then see if it had a part to play in the CSC, is
At the
that
town of
right?
Washington level,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wouldn't trees fit into the NRI in some way?
Yeah,
Forests
yeah,
and
they
stuff
will,
like
but
that?
we also, that whole,
Well, what I'm saying is, couldn't it fit into the NRI?
well, yeah, no, it will. Can I put you in charge of that?
No, Walt was interested in that.
No, I know. We have a couple of people. And then also the noise ordinance, or whatever you want to call that. We need a more focused,
I have to say, I think I had said after we talked about it, I did some research on it. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm hesitant to put a noise ordinance in place because is noise really a big issue?
Well, maybe it's something in relation to hospitality. Maybe there could be something
right.
related to
I think that's what it
hospitality,
was that,
or events.
right.
I do think what I have heard is there's concern from the town's perspective about enforcement. Like, if we have it and we don't enforce it, like, who's going to enforce it? Because we don't, the village has its police force, we have Troop K, and the Troop K guy really going to go out to Bangle Road or noise ordinance, and is that a good use of his or her time?
Right.
I don't know.
But if it gives neighbors the right to complain, and
Right, that's what
then
my response to it was.
that's the policing right
Yeah.
there, is that,
At least there's something that they can hang their hat on. I
Right.
agree with
a
that.
gu- and a guidelines, and we really just needed something on the spectrum of what would be included in it, because you can't put a noise ordinance to every single thing that people, animals, or vehicles do, even though there are certain things, but just guidelines that would give some perimeters to the noise. So I know you threw some things at us, but we need it written on what can be focused on, what it might be suggestive to, hospitality or whatever. I mean, there
some
are,
other neighboring towns have them. It'd be
yeah,
interesting
if you wanted to see what the neighboring towns
Okay, I'll go
have.
back into it. I just, my concern is that our society is just being regulated and regulated and regulated, and my concern is then it's just going to start this downward spiral of, your car was really noisy last night.
Well, I think it has to be like a certain level.
Correct.
Let's just see.
Okay, just see what,
I'll go back.
see what the local, what the other
I'll go
areas are doing.
yeah, I
And
mean, it's
Shannon, do you
one thing
know
if
on the
it's,
Ash
if
Street
it's a one-time
piece,
party,
Yeah.
with the
but if
safety
it's
issue,
An ongoing
And it's
issue.
happening again
The
and
trees
again
that are
and again.
dying
next door.
currently,
That makes
the
sense.
trees that were first
That's-
infected are all
that's
edge
the
trees,
issue.
so they're
Yeah,
all in
that makes
rows.
sense.
Like they're right on the edge of the road.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
So I wonder, like, so my.
highway's gonna have to do something about that.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
ask Joe Spagnolo about that, because I think we should find that out. I mean, if
Thanks,
there's.
thank you.
If you
Rebecca.
drive around the village, so there's one in my yard.
Okay.
There's one.
Yeah.
The ash trees, they're all dying right
Oh, yeah.
now. They've been infected for a while, but the drought just pushed them.
Kill them
in.
off,
But
yeah.
Elm Drive, the school has several.
Oh, yeah.
There's some, I mean, they're,
Is
but
there
they're
some
all on
ash
the road,
disease?
Okay.
edge. There's, the emerald ash borer
Ah,
has been spreading slowly, but this year it just kind of allowed it to really,
Overdrive with
because of the drought.
drought.
and I mean,
It's been building.
it's been a done deal for a while, but they've been kind of
Pushing,
persisting,
yeah.
but I mean, they're just, everywhere I
This
look, the
is
ash
it.
are dead now.
Yeah. All right, going on to new business. We have the upcoming meeting dates for anything anybody can join. Please feel free. Is there any, any, for the open comments and questions, there's nobody on with us. I did get a plant a tree for Stephanie
thank you.
in honor of her help for the town, and I did.
For you.
And did it from the CAC with a little note. All right, so I just wanted to let you know that we did that. And that actually is the only thing I have to tell you. I don't think there's anything else. Any other comments, questions? Sorry, when? It's in September. I don't actually, it did, for some reason, it didn't tell her date, but I can get you the date.
Fall 2020.
Yeah, fall 2020.
There you go.
So she was 1936 to 2020. She had a good life. So, if there's no other questions, comments, or concerns, can I have a motion to close?
Well, I'd like to talk
Oh,
about
no. We nearly did it. Oh, look, that's what these chameleons are for. Oh, right, and I forgot, before we go, we had the thank you from Adelaide to the CAC for protecting our wetlands, our continued support.
Is it chameleons or lizards?
They
They're
are
supposed to be chameleons.
or newts.
I mean, they're
She calls them
like
some-
salamanders.
Or salamanders.
Does she refer to them as
It's a-
chameleons or
no, it's a
salamanders?
salamanders,
Okay.
yeah. Because we have the little orange salamanders over by my house.
There we go.
Yeah. So, yeah. So do I have a motion to?
Motion to close.
One, Pam, and
I second
second,
that.
Elizabeth, all in favor? Aye, good night, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night and good evening. Thanks for the
It looks like
cookies.
there's a salamander bird.